Well, we've been sitting on 20 for a little bit here, so I think I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for logging into our third virtual town hall meeting on our wastewater treatment plant project and the resort tax bond election. We're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about the recent complaint that appeared in the Bozeman Chronicle. I'll be speaking to that to kind of explain what we've got going on with our ponds. And then Susan Swimley, the attorney for the district, is on the call, and she's going to speak to the creation of county water and sewer districts, how that works. And then Scott Buecker is also one of our panelists. Scott's our senior project engineer, and he will be addressing some of the engineering components of this, as well as answering some of the questions we've gotten as a byproduct of the first two meetings that we've run. Just a few ground rules. We've got 20 people on the call, so please make sure your microphones are muted. If I get feedback, I may mute you from my end, and if you want to speak, you'll have to unmute your microphone. The chat feed will be running, so we'll be looking at that. I posted an initial chat just as a welcome, so you can see that, and that's a good way to ask questions too. And so our plan is to take as long as it takes to work through your questions and try to address them as you have them. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. Many of you may have seen this in the Bozeman Chronicle. I believe it came out on Monday. I got a call last week from NPR Radio, a gal there, reporter there, wanting comment on this complaint that the Cottonwood Law was filing. And we hadn't seen the complaint, so I had no idea what it was about. We eventually got it by mail this week. I was able to find it at the end of last week. So when Perrin called me from the Chronicle, I did know something about it because I had found their complaint on their website. They also did a video and posted it on Vimeo. They came up here, looks like from the snow, maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and flew a drone around the Middle Fork and posted this video. This is just a screenshot from that. And you can see on the bottom part of the screen, they say there's an illegal discharge, question mark, the West Fork of the Gallatin River. On that, you can see in this image, there's a manhole right here. It's part of the area that's thawed. And I'll show you pictures of that later on. And really what we've got here is there's a huge underdrain system that's part of our pond network. And I'll show you the plans for that. This is an aerial image of our storage ponds. These were constructed on top of the original ponds that Big Sky built in the mid-70s. The original ponds were lined with the bentonite clay, which did not work very well, so the ponds were effectively leaking into the groundwater for 20 years. In 1996, we hired contractors to expand and install liners in these ponds, which is the way it looks today. So as you look at these, you see black liners that are along the sides and bottom of each one of these ponds. These are the plans from the actual pond construction from 1996. This was done by C&H Engineering. They were the engineer working for the district. These plans went to DEQ. They were approved as part of the overall plant expansion, storage pond expansion, lining the ponds. These black pipes are big perforated PVC pipes that sit below our liner and move groundwater away from the liner. And the reason they're there is because our ponds are so deep, it intersects groundwater. And if you've got liners sitting in your groundwater, as that water table comes up, you run the risk of having the groundwater pick your liner and float it up off the bottom. So to prevent that, you put these, what we call underdrain systems in, which we've had in place since '97. Up here, you can see this circle. Well, that's the manhole that I showed you in the image before. This is a drawing of the second pond furthest to the west, which is closest to our office here. And you can see the black lines. That's another network of piping, also part of this underdrain system that runs into a manhole in the dike that flows into the network under storage pond 1 and eventually makes its way out of the system. So this is the same drawing, just overlaid on top of the Google Earth aerial image. So that's pond 1. And this is pond 3 overlaid. And then if I draw the network of piping underneath these liners, you can see where these lines are and the fact that they go out through this manhole and they go out the side of the berm down into the middle fort. This is the detailed drawing of what the construction methods were for installing these underdrain pipes. So this is a cross-sectional view that shows the drain tile detail when we built this back in the 90s. This is a video I took just the other day that shows the water coming out of the dike right below our ponds. That's groundwater coming out of the manhole and piping above it. I don't know if I probably couldn't make it up the bank. This is the manhole. Grant and I were up there. We popped the lid on it, so that's a video. That's flowing 20, 30 gallons a minute right now as we come out of spring. So this is all the water that's coming from the underdrain system and making its way down to the middle fort. And so the first video was me standing down here taking that as I walk down. Now I've got some pictures of the original construction dating back to 96. This all when we started filling the ponds in 97. You can see these massive liners. It's a 60 mil HDP liner we're putting down. So these underdrains that I'm talking about are underneath of these bedded areas that the liners went down. This picture to the right is the actual pipe that's coming out of the side of the embankment. It was, there's riprap around it and vegetation's covered it now, but that's where all this stuff comes out of the side of the dike there. These are more construction photos. You can see here, clearly there's a trench with gravel. There's an excavator here digging a linear trench. These are all related to the underdrain system construction. Here we are. These are lined with the geotex fabric. This is a perforated PVC. And the whole idea for this is that it allows groundwater to come into the pipe. The geofabric gives you a filter around that to prevent sediment from coming into the pipe. And then it makes its way out the back side of the storage ponds. A couple more pictures of the construction. The picture on the right is one of our liner installers. They use a specialized machine which overlaps the seams and it creates a weld. It's actually a heat fused weld that gives you a leak proof seam there that is part of the whole liner construction. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any questions on any of what I just covered that any of you might have that are on the call.
Ron, I have a question.
Yep.
Are you required to monitor that at all through your permit? That's my first question. The second question is if you've noticed if it runs year round, if the groundwater level drops significantly after this time of year and it's dry.
All right, those good questions, Kristen. No, there's no permit required for it, and there never has been because it's groundwater. DEQ has never made that a permit condition. It does run year round. I don't know if you remember when Doug Kramer had his nursery down below the ponds. He was watering, he had a pump in that manhole, and he laid out some 1-inch PVC down to his nursery and was using that for his watering all summer. And because it's not any permit condition. You know, we haven't been testing it. We don't monitor the flow. So there's not much record in terms of what the water quality looks like or what the flow looks like through that. But it does seem to run year round. The other part of your question that's important for me to point out, because we're an irrigation 100% reuse system, there is no permit associated with any of this. Okay, when you get into permits, it's when you have groundwater disposals and surface water disposals. Then DEQ gives you a permit to do either one of those activities. But because we're 100% land application, Montana does not require any kind of permit for that. Now, they have given us monitoring plans that we do in lieu of the fact we don't have permits, but us and every other land application system in Montana do not have any kind of formal permit from Montana Department of Environmental Quality. Any other questions on that piece of it?
Ron, you might
Go ahead.
go ahead. I was just going to say you might reiterate that these under drains are very typical for these reservoirs, and the reason is to give the groundwater a place to go so it doesn't build up and create pressure underneath the liner. And then if the district takes the reservoir offline to maintain it and inspect it, if a lot of groundwater built up, it can pop that liner up and do damage to the earthwork underneath it. So these underdrain systems are very typical for these lined reservoirs, especially when you're in an area of high groundwater like the district.
That's correct. And most of these big excavations, if not all, have some sort of underdrain system that's part of that plan and construction for those projects. The other thing that I think is important to recognize is the history of that part of Big Sky. That was a leaking sort of line pond for the first 20 years of its existence. And you had old sludge deposits in the old lagoon. So no doubt if you test groundwater that runs through there, you may see elevated nitrates, but we also see elevated nitrates well above the golf course, some of which are approaching double digits. So I don't know what samples were pulled or what the numbers look like, but I think it's important to know that, you know, cause and elevated nitrates, where they're coming from in something like this is a very difficult thing to say, oh, it's leaking through your ponds. Well, we don't know that. We have no reason to think we've got big leaks in our ponds. So any other questions, comments? Moving along, I'm going to jump to Susan. She's on the call, and Susan, I've got one slide I'll put up. So a little background, Susan is our attorney for the Water and Sewer District and has been for quite a few years. And she's our general counsel for most things Big Sky Water and Sewer. I know she also represents a number of county water and sewer districts around Gallatin County and other places. And we had asked her to get involved with the canyon discussions as far as how a water and sewer district could be created in the Gallatin Canyon area. And I think maybe this is a repeat, but we do have a few new people on this. So Susan, if you wouldn't mind just walking us through what that process would look like.
Sure, and thanks for this time. I would tell you that when you're contemplating creating a new water and sewer district, there just comes a point where all the aspects have to be looked at and a path has to be chosen. So generally there are two methods to establish a water and sewer district. The first is you can seek 10% of the qualified electorate to sign a petition to create the water and sewer district. The other is a petition signed by 100% of the landowners that would be within the boundaries. Now, that all seems really simple, but when you start to say, okay, what do we want a boundary, what is a reasonable boundary for a district, you also have to consider what are the costs to provide service for that district, because you're going to spread those costs over those lands. And another kind of quasi factor that goes into the decision of whether it's you're going to have, I would call it a smaller consolidated district with 100% of the landowners, or you'd seek a bigger, generally it's a better idea to seek a bigger district and look for the 10% of qualified electorate. The other factor that has to do with that is how do you anticipate, as reasonable as is possible, that growth would happen. If you start with a smaller, more compact district, get 100% of the landowners, those people bear the costs of getting the services in place. And that's an entire process in and of itself to get that the financing to do those things. So that's one factor. Then anytime you would want to look at annexing or bringing inland to the district that would then receive service from the district has to have services available for any land to be annexed. So you kind of take the package of all of those ideas and you say, okay, which one do we pick? What's more reasonable for being able to finance? What's more reasonable for purposes of getting enough land base to be able to get to start the project and get it financed in the beginning so that you can spread those costs. And then once that path is chosen, then that dictates whether there's an election or not. And my first note that I gave everybody is to go back to that technical memo number 1, because Mason, John, and Scott put together like really nice, concise flow chart, as good as you can do this for the law, but about how those processes work and where you go and what the steps are. So rather than belaboring the time and tell you, like, the big decisions to be made are, is it you're going to seek a agreement of 100% of the landowners who will be in the initial district, or would those boundaries be larger and you'd seek the approval of, and that would require seek the approval of the 10% electorate. If you go with the 10% electorate, then you have to have an election to go out there. If it's the 100% of landowners, then you are not required to have an election. You may have an election, but you're not required to have one. And just so when people are thinking about what that district might look like, what the services might look like, those are kind of some of the bigger parameter pictures that people have to think about in order to start drawing lines and talking to people and figuring out where the pros and cons are. Questions?
Don't see it in the chat either. We can come back to it if there are questions. Thanks, Susan. Now I'm gonna jump down to the frequently asked questions we've gotten, and we've gotten some of these from individuals from the first 2 meetings that we've run, and some of these I can take, some Scott can take. And then after this, we'll get into the election that's going on. So, Scott, you want to take that first one?
Sure. And we've got Brent Bogar to jump in on finance and those type of questions. But one question we've gotten is the project necessary considering the current economic environment. So the concept being that COVID-19 has altered the landscape enough that this project can be delayed or something. That is not the case. The district is about 2 years away at its typical development rate from having enough capacity at that plant to develop. That would be in normal years where there's about 20 to 25 single family equivalent connections coming online, requesting capacity from that plant. That may change with COVID-19 a little bit. We don't know yet what's happening exactly, but long term, you have to be ready for that to come back, and 2 years is the right planning period. Projects like this of this complexity and scale take 2 years to build once you start. So there's no float in the schedule. We are due to finish design early this fall, get it out to bid, get a contractor contracted and proceeding on the work in the winter of 2020-21. So there's just not any room to alter that. And there's nobody out there saying that COVID-19 years. So we're going to keep going. Brent, you want to take that second one?
Yeah. So the second one that gets asked, and this is probably one of the bigger ones as well, is how is the project funded? And as we'll discuss later, there's the vote for the 1% infrastructure resort tax, and that's what's on the ballot that's out there right now and is being contemplated to help fund the project. That would fund 60% of the project. The rest of the project funding comes from the sewer district, and that's through debt servicing. And the existing rate structure may or may not need to be adjusted to help cover some of those debt payments. There's a lot of factors that go into calculating your debt payments and the reserves necessary and the revenues necessary, depending on growth within the district or contraction because of COVID-19 possibly. And so until we actually get to the actual loan process and getting that approved through the state, through their SRF program, that's when we'll know what those payments need to be and what that would look like. In regards to impact fees, well, we can charge the impact fees for new developments and stuff. You can't really charge $35 million in impact fees for the expansion and expect that just the new people are paying for that when the existing users of the system will also be benefiting from that system. So it does, well, impact fees can help lessen that, and they may take away the possibility of needing to increase rates because the impact fees help to offset that new development and those new connections. It's not a feasible way to fund the whole project.
Thanks, Brent. I'll take the next one. The project does not include discharging to the Gallatin River. If the resort tax is approved by the voters, there is a pipeline that is in the infrastructure package that would gravity down 64, taking treated effluent from the district to the canyon area for groundwater discharge in the short term and reuse opportunities in the longer term. So there is a pipeline going down there, but if there's no discharge to the Gallatin River, it's going to turn south and carry that pressure that's created by the elevation of the district above the canyon and carry that highly treated effluent as far as possible up the canyon for reuse and groundwater discharge.
Hey, Scott.
Brent, I'll let you take.
I'm gonna go back to the impact fee one because that question comes up a lot. So I want to give the audience a little background on that. I'm gonna pull this is off our website. So we've got two types of what we call planned investment charges. And these are based on kind of all the projects we've done to date. I've been here almost 25 years. In my time here, we've done almost $30 million of projects, most of which have been funded by general obligation bonds, which go to the tax levy. For this project, we're looking at using revenue bonds, which goes to the rate base. So it's different. But we've got a system in place that provides a means to charge new development as they connect to water and sewer. So we've got sewer charges of $2,360 per single family equivalent. And an SFE is basically a calculation from kind of the size of what you're building. In the case of condominiums and single family homes, we've got two tables that you look at the size of the structure you're building. You have multipliers that you then figure the SFEs, and then it's a straight multiplication against the $2,360 per single family equivalent. For water, it's $515 per single family equivalent. Most homes in Big Sky end up being 1.5 to 2 SFEs in size. So typical connection permits might be, $8,000 to $10,000 for a single family home or a condominium. For larger projects, big commercial hotels, we use a different table based on the types of uses and spaces in that, and the fees are much larger. I remember when the Summit Hotel went in, the fees were over $1 million for that. The effect of that is over time, we have built up some reserves. Let me see if I can. And then this is off our financial statement at the April meeting. So we've got, under these restricted funds here, these amounts of money. So we've got 3.36 million of our own money, and we're actually using some of that for this work we're doing right now with our engineers. And then we have talked about putting forward some of that reserve out of plant investment funds toward the initial construction of the plant. The amount of that will be determined by our board. We're not going to put it to zero, but we do have some funds that could go into that to reduce the amount we've got to go borrow and potentially put on the rate base. So these are being collected over time. Some of the questions I've gotten are, why don't you just go charge it to the Yellowstone Club? Well, the Yellowstone Club has nothing connected to us. They're not in our district. They have nothing to do with any of the wastewater loads that come into our plant. Spanish Peaks does, and those projects that are connecting up there, including the new lodge that's going in, the big hotel complex, that is connected to our district, and they have paid into the plant investment fund. So you're never going to collect enough solely by plant investment funds as new development comes online, but we do plan on using some of what we have collected to help fund the project. And so I think that amount will change over time as we get more construction, new developments, that kind of thing. We are going to be looking at the whole plant investment charge amount. Scott Buecker's firm has a group that does rate analysis, and they helped us as we developed our new sewer and water tiered rates for commercial, residential, and irrigation classes. So kind of the next step with them will be to start looking at our plant investment charges. Since we now have a big capital project on the horizon, it's easier to figure out what those numbers look like when you're building something than when you go back retroactively and figure it out based on past debt loads, which is what we've done to develop the rates you see on the screen there. Scott, I think you're.
And our people can't do that work until we know what the funding structure looks like, which will be a big impact from the May 5th vote. So that's why we had to wait on the impact fee portion of that study. Brent, I'm going to run through the non-financial questions here and then turn it back over to you for that. Will the project impact sewer rates? Bullet number 5 there is a sewer district created for the Canyon area with the vote. No. I understand why this could confuse some people. The interlocal agreement that was negotiated with the resort tax for the district to get 27 million or 60% of the water resource recovery facility built came with a commitment to take wastewater from the canyon area if a district forms down in the canyon area within 3 years via a lift station at the intersection of 64 and 191 and a force main up Highway 64. So the district is committing to accepting wastewater from a district area if a district is formed down there, from a canyon area, if a district is formed down there, but the vote on May 5th for the resort tax does not put that ball in motion. People living in the canyon area need to get together and form a district in order to take advantage of that $12 million that the resort tax is putting in front of the voters for that lift station and force main. But a yes vote does not mean that the canyon area district is forming and automatically. Schedule for the project, we're currently sitting at about 70% design. These projects take at least a year to design, depending on complexity and size. We will be working on finishing that, taking it to 90 and 100% this summer and early fall. We'll have to submit those plans and specs to DEQ for their 60-day approval period, and then we'll put it out to bid in the fall of 2020. That would allow us to get the contractor under contract in November, December, and give them notice to proceed hopefully somewhere around the new year. And they would spend much of that winter getting contracts in place, getting shop drawings together, a lot of the paper side of a construction project, and there's a lot of it, getting all that done or the bulk of it going, and they could start building as soon as the weather allowed in spring of 2021. And as I said, these projects can take 2 years from start to finish, but there's a milestone in there called substantial completion, where we're actually making the new water, starting up that treatment plant, and that higher quality water, having that additional capacity for more connections, and we project that as summer of 2022. The discharge options that'll be opened up by that higher performance treatment plant, it's a membrane bioreactor, 0.04 micron filter in there, in basically what is a reactors of bacterial cells, so that those bacterial cells build up on the membrane. You're pulling suction pressure through that membrane. Contaminants are withheld on the other side, so that water quality coming out of an MBR plant is exceptional. Montana calls it Class A-1 effluent, and basically it takes almost all the handcuffs off of any reuse you could think of. You still have to go get a permit, and Montana, while it acknowledges that Class A-1 effluent can be used for snowmaking or potable reuse, we don't have permits in hand. Nobody in Montana has a permit in hand from DEQ to make snow or put it back in the ground and pull it and drink it. So those are processes that have to be worked through regardless, but we're starting with an effluent that is conceptually acceptable for those uses. And then what items will I pay the 1% tax on? So this is really a resort tax question, but this is detailed on the website. And the way it was explained to me that helped me take and to capture the items or items that people buy when they're visiting or on a vacation. So if you want to buy a frozen pizza and cook it, that's on the 1% tax. If you want to buy the ingredients and make your own pizza, those are not on the 1% tax. That's kind of an analogy, but it helps me segregate, what's a resort tax versus what is not. And if there's me or anybody wants to elaborate on that, please do.
Yeah, I was just going to comment. We have ordinance 9801, which was recently modified and finalized by our board that outlines all of the specificity of what items are taxed and what items are not. And you hit the nail on the head, Scott. It's really items that are luxury items and goods and services that mostly are purchased by tourists that utilize the products and services within the district.
Thanks, Danny. Brent, I'm going to go back to that rate impact of the project on current rates question.
Yeah, we can touch on that just one more time, and Ron kind of covered that as well in regards to what the rates are and the impact fees, that once we know what the financing truly looks like, and then the district will be able to make a informed decision in regards to what adjustments might need to be made. It's very clear that if the resort tax does not pass, it's going to impact rates. You know, that because if the project needs to move forward and the district is going to have to figure out a way to pay for that project, they have the option, as Ron mentioned, revenue bonds, which would be tied to rates, or general obligation bonds, which is tied to the existing property tax. And so the district's going to have to look at some combination of that if the resort tax does not pass. If the resort tax does pass, there'll still have to be an evaluation to ensure that the payments can be made, but it's going to be a lot less impact in that regards when you're looking at the resort tax commitment of 60% of the project, or up to $27 million, not having to be covered through rates.
And on that point, our board has talked about this project. We've been working on it for months and months, and the consensus is that we're going to continue to move forward. We're optimistic what will be favorable on the resort tax piece. So there's nobody, at least at this point, that's talking about stopping all this work and not expand the wastewater plant. So if the 1% doesn't go through, then it becomes a rate issue for the district and its user base. Brent, you want to cover the slide I've got up there? These are kind of the big bullet pieces on the resort tax 1% initiative.
I can. As was mentioned earlier, the Big Sky Water and Sewer District, along with the Resort Tax District, they had a subcommittee that worked and developed an interlocal agreement to partner together in funding this project, which will pay if the 1% vote that is out there right now, if that we learn that passes on May 5th. It's the resort taxes committing that new 1% to fund up to 60% of the project, or $27 million of the project. Additionally, that, as Scott mentioned, the Canyon project, if a Canyon district is formed, and that was covered earlier again by Scott and Susan in regards to what's necessary there, 100% of the pipeline and lift station would be paid by the resort tax to help kind of, I guess I'll call it, kickstart a Canyon district. But that commitment is only there if a Canyon district is formed by the people that live there. Additionally, with the resort tax, if that does pass, the sewer district did commit that 500 additional SFEs, so the new plant will add additional capacity for the community, and the district is committing 500 SFE for workforce housing to work towards finding affordable housing solutions for the workforce and others in the community. And so that's a commitment and a partnership between the sewer district and the resort tax district, along with that housing. The other piece to this is this last bullet point: no additional requests for resort tax funding during the agreement. And what this is really saying is, with the commitment in the 1%, if that passes, the sewer district will utilize those funds as outlined, and they will not submit applications to the existing 3% resort tax that's in place right now that supports a number of community organizations and infrastructure projects. In the past, the sewer district has received funding through the resort tax, that 3% side. This would set that the sewer district gets the 1% side, and they're not submitting applications to the 3%. So that leaves that 3% side of the resort tax to support those community organizations. I don't know if Danny or has anything else he'd like to add on that.
One thing that's important to note in the interlocal agreement, Canyon would have till the end of 2022 to create a district, which gives them plenty of time to do that. The other thing I think that is important to note is, you know, I get asked, well, where would this workforce housing go, the 500 SFEs? And the answer to that, some of it could be in the Canyon, some of it could be in our own district in Town Center, possibly up at Lone Moose Meadows. So there's no geographic designation specified by that, but it could be in both areas, I think, over time. What the pro rata split, district, Canyon, that's not discussed. It just says 500 SFEs. So if they create a separate district down in the Canyon, we can do an interlocal agreement or a service contract where wastewater from the Canyon comes up, gets treated at our plant, goes back down, gets disposed of in engineered drain fields in and around the Canyon area. I've said many times in meetings, you know, this isn't unlike what happens at Gallatin Gateway. They've got a contract with the Four Corners Water and Sewer District where they give them 22,000 gallons a day of wastewater capacity, and Four Corners takes that from their lift station, charges them for that on a fee that they agreed to, and then they treat it at the Four Corners plant at Elk Grove there. So similar types of service contracts could work here where you had a separate district. They don't have to annex into us. And frankly, my board is not interested in annexing anything down below our current boundary to the east of us here. So we got a few chat questions.
Yeah, I was going to say we got a question from Jim Delzer. Does the Canyon District need to be formed before the project can begin? And I tried to answer, but then I realized it's not quite nuanced enough. The district's water resource recovery facility phase 1 project, the 35 million, of which resort tax would potentially pay 27 million or 60%. That can proceed because that infrastructure is needed and necessary, and those users are already online or platted and permitted. The portion that would be for the Canyon area could not be built until a Canyon area formed, and would basically be the one putting that wastewater into that system. So you can't just go build that with the idea that someday there'll be wastewater to go into it. It gets into DEQ and SRF funding and permitting, but you just can't do that.
I can touch on this slide, and we've shown this at other calls we've done. So the ballots on the 1% vote went out April 17th. My office did a mailing with our first quarterly water and sewer bills that went out to our customer base, and but it's those residents and ratepayers that get bills within the water and sewer district boundary. There was a second mailing done to a broader mailing, which is the list we got from county election office for Madison, Gallatin counties, because the resort tax district sits in both. And the electorate is different for resort tax elections than it is for water and sewer districts. For water and sewer districts, property owners can vote and be registered somewhere else. They've got to go through some hoops to do that, but they can qualify themselves to vote. Resort tax elections are different. You have to be registered to vote in the resort tax district to get a ballot to be voting on this. So the pool of people electing or voting on the 1% is a resort tax driven matter, not water and sewer district law and our election procedures. So the ballots went out the 17th. We're instructing people to return their ballot by April 28th, which was behind us now. You can still take your ballot and drive it down to Gallatin County, and we would recommend you do that and not risk putting it in the mail at this point. And up till May 5th, Gallatin County will be receiving ballots for this. So if you miss the 28th, we would suggest you drop it off at the courthouse in Gallatin County to have your vote counted. And I believe the criteria is just simple majority on the initiative as far as whether it passes or not.
Okay.
There's lots of information on the Resort Tax District website. We've got a few things here I'll put on the screen as well. So as has been the case with every one of these meetings, when we're done, I record the meetings, I put them on our website. So we've got a lot of meetings and videos of these meetings as we've gone through and done these over time. If you click on the times associated, you can jump right to that portion of the video within the larger video file. We participated in the Explore Big Skies town hall meeting on April 13th. This video, I actually edited it down for our portion of that meeting, so it's kind of the stuff wrapped around the Water and Sewer District project. This is a video that our architects put together for my board at the last meeting, which kind of walks through what the plant looks like in renderings that you can look at to get a feel for what the overall project looks like. Let's see, so this meeting will go here as well. We've got a web page devoted to this project where we update it over time with some of these FAQs and questions that come in and try to provide answers to those things on our website. So this was a meeting announcement for the meeting today, and this will be the last one we're doing leading up to the election. Danny's got a lot of good information out on the resort tax website, and there's a page devoted to the 1% for infrastructure initiative. Some of these posters have been around the community. The Chamber of Commerce recently had a full page ad in our papers up here supporting the initiative as our chamber. And so you'll see some of these things around the community here. Other questions?
Is there a process for that's been selected for that the design basis is on for the MBR system? Bogar, Era, any of them?
That was breaking up a little bit. Did you get that, Scott?
I didn't either.
Sorry, a minute. Is it better now?
Yep, that's better.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's a basis of design for the MBR selected already, and if so, is there any early procurement of that once the contractor is selected to help with schedule?
That's good questions, and I'm going to let either Scott Jungwirth or Scott Buecker take that. And I think Scott Buecker may be off now, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, we did a design report where we evaluated many alternatives on the improvements and expansion project. That is all available, I believe, on the district's website as well. And in that, we determined that MBR was the best approach for the goals that the district had here. And then also we had pre-procured the membrane equipment, and we're currently under contract with the membrane supplier for all the equipment associated with the membrane operating system. And so that project, we're moving forward on that contract and have been working with the membrane supplier, which then that contract will be turned over to the contractor when the bid for the overall construction project is awarded.
Anything else? Other questions, either by chat or verbally? Scott Jungwirth, I just put up the schedule just as a reminder. We show this a lot, but I think we need to, if you would touch on this one. Scott Jungwirth?
Yeah, like Buecker was saying, we're moving along with our design here and moving into final design, and aiming for a DEQ review period this late summer, early fall, and then give them required time to review plans and specs, and then be able to get the project out for bidding in early fall time frame, with then negotiating contracts with the contractor in late fall, and hope to award and get the contracts in place and notice to proceed end of 2020, and contractors can start construction in December, and then probably start breaking ground on the site in the spring of 2020.
Which is very similar to the timeline we had for the SBR plant, the plant we currently have. We started in September of 2002, put the plant online in the first week of June of 2004.
I should clarify, start construction in spring 2021 on site.
Anything else? See anything else coming in? I will keep the meeting open for a while longer. This was kind of a big overview session, and there may be folks on this meeting call that weren't there for the other two that might have questions about more of the kind of detailed stuff about the plant project. So I'll keep the meeting open, and if you want to stick around, I'd be happy to address that. And I'll ask Scott Jungwirth and Brent Bogar to stick around too to help with those. So if there aren't any other questions, the rest of the audience, thank you for participating, and I will be putting a copy of this recording up on our website. So thank you all, and I will hang around for a little bit longer.
Thanks, guys. Good meeting.
Thanks.
Ron, you have another question from Jim Delzer in the chat.
Okay. Once the Canyon District is formed, when would first assessments be sent? I'll take a stab at that. You know, as far as assessments, number one, I'm not sure you would necessarily have an assessment. As water and sewer districts, you have a lot of authority to develop rates and charges. It could be tax levies. It could be based on user fee of some sort. It could be a bond repayment scheme that's based on special assessments per lot area, that kind of stuff. So when you use the word assessments, I'm not exactly sure what the context of that would be, but that, and when you would do that would be, I think, when you actually were in a position where you had something that was creating costs for your district. And I've said in some of these meetings, you can go out and create your district and not have any bills to be paying initially. And as you go forward, you could be hiring some maintenance services to service the level 2 systems you already have. You could develop a pumping program down in the canyon. How you would develop rates and charges for those would be up to the district once you got that created. So it's a pretty broad question as to exactly when that would happen. Not exactly sure when in time it would be. If the lift station gets built and then that becomes available for the canyon residents, then that could trigger assessments to help pay and run the cost for the lift station that would be used to pump water back up to the plant here in the meadow. Brent, I don't know if you want to add to that at all.
No, I think you kind of covered it. It really is up to the district when that district's created, how those assessments or fees would be charged and when they would be charged.
What I do know, Jim, is that county water and sewer districts have a lot of authority to do a lot of different things. It's not like an RID. It's not like a neighborhood HOA. There's 2 chapters in Montana law that empower county water and sewer districts to do a lot of stuff. And all you got to do is go back and look at our history to see that. So, and you've been around longer than I have in Big Sky. When the moratorium came down in 1993, we were a rural improvement district. It was the rural district 305. And they were very ill-equipped to deal with the stuff that was coming down on them with the moratorium and all the costs associated with fixing the problems around here. That's what led to the creation of the district in 93, which became the right organization to deal with some of these big fixes that needed to happen and ways to charge and pay for it. So same thing down there. You know, I look at it as just progressing in terms of the maturity of the canyon area. Big Sky, you really control your fate once you get a water and sewer district created down there, and you control how much stuff you take on, but you have the tools to go pay for it if you need to. So. Another question from Jim, wondering about the timing of initial cost to owner for new developments or new hookups. Maybe I'll let Brent, I don't know if Mesa's on the line or not with WGM Group. Some of this stuff I think has been touched on in some of the Canyon meetings, but as far as the none of which would apply until you create the district, I guess, and until you construct something down there. So the lift station that's contemplated as part of the 1% election, that wouldn't be online for a couple of years. that could be the trigger that would necessitate some sort of assessment to the canyon residents.
Yeah, in regards to timing of initial cost to owners for new developments or new hookups, I would say again, that's if it's in the canyon area, it's going to be defined by that canyon district.
Right.
If it's in Big Sky, if it's within the existing district's boundaries, then it's going to be just as it is for everyone else. When they get their permits, they pay those PIC charges or impact fees, as others might call them.
And the impact fees in the canyon could be totally structured differently, and they should be different. There really is no nexus or connection to how we developed our impact fees. It would be a different number down there.
Yeah, I would say with the canyon project, if a district were formed, they would want to take the time to do the work, because they're going to have certain capital expenses that Big Sky doesn't have in trying to calculate their fees, and there are going to be some things that they don't have to take into consideration because they're a brand new district. So the calculation for rates and fees, you can use others as kind of a baseline, but they're going to want to study that independently to make sure that it's covering their expenses.
Jim's last comment there was, I think I touched on that and that has been a confusing thing. There are folks that think that the Canyon District was going to just be an extension of our district boundary, and it has not been the case. We want them to do an independent thing down there. We don't want to be expanding our boundary into the canyon. I'm just going to pull up our district boundary here. So the red area there is the water and sewer district boundary. And the black line here is the county line. So all the mountain village off to the left is Madison County. Part of Spanish Peaks is Madison. Coming down, you go through Lone Moose, Aspen Groves, then you get into the Meadow Village, and our district boundary ends right below tract A1, which is where the hardware store sits. That's a long linear parcel that goes to Jim Irwin's place to the east here. This is the substation just to the north. In the canyon area, none of which is in our district boundary. The resort tax district boundary looks like that. It's a very big area. It's 265 square miles. We're geographically about 3.7% of that larger area. And again, the canyon's a subset of that, but there's really no political boundary defined by the canyon area. We have nothing in the way of plans or activities to try to expand the district into the canyon. So. What is the plan for the properties just south of Low Mountain Trail? Another good question. I'll pull the map back up. I'll show you what that looks like. It's the old Grizzly Flats development, which Tom Leroy did back in the 90s when I first came here. So this is the American Bank property. They have come to the district 2 or 3 times over the years asking to be annexed into the district, asking to be connected to the sewer system over here. my board has historically been very, very reluctant to expand the district boundary until we expand our treatment capacity. So they've been told, no, we're not going to annex you in. We'll consider it, if we get this plant upgrade going where we are able to expand our capacity and disposal options. But at least for right now, they came to us last year, kind of the second half of 2019. The answer was again, no, let's wait. And if things develop where we're expanding the plant, we'll reconsider. But at least for now, they've been told, no, we're not going to annex you in. They are connected to our water system with a line that goes over to the Meadow Village area or the commercial center. So there is a small service line just for that building. Problem with that is it's a small line. You can't add additional buildings to that. So if there were more buildings on that side of the road, the water line would have to be upgraded to at least a 6-inch line. And we would probably go 8-inch for that. And you could add more buildings to that. That's a rendering for people that might not have seen this. This is a rendering of the plant plans. All of the stuff to the east side of this, from the digesters are there. All of this stuff exists with the plant we built in 2002. The stuff that's west of there, all of this is the new MBR facility and is the big driver for the cost of that. There's a rendering there in the bottom right, kind of an elevation drawing. There's one of the key points in this plant is this stuff to the north. So we've talked about phase 1 and phase 2, and phase 1 is what this part here to the south is what we're going to build. And then the question was, do you have to build phase 2 before you do phase 1 just because of the construction difficulties of getting back behind this thing? And I think the engineers did a good job working with contractors to look at that and concluded that no, you do not have to build the second phase of tankage into this. There is some retaining wall stuff that we'll have to do, but which is good news because we can set about building the first part and then come in later and add the second part. The other thing that's important is because we don't have to build phase 2, we've got a headworks building. Let me do all these marks. This building right here is where all the flow comes through our initial screening building, and we turn our sewer system on. So by doing phase 1 without doing the second phase of tankage, we can keep our headworks in service, which is a big deal. Anytime you have to bypass your treatment plant to do a upgrade, it adds cost and difficulty, and how are you going to manage that? So the way we're laid out right now, we can be working on the new facility, keeping our existing headworks and SBR basins in place.
Well, I'm not in on the video part. I'm in on the audio. That's what I wanted.
From my standpoint, that's a big help, just operationally. So. Anything else? Any other questions? Let's see if the chat's gone any. Okay, I think we've covered all the chat questions. Brent, Scott, I don't know if you have any closing remarks. Anything you want to add?
I think we've covered it. Just a reminder, if someone on the call hasn't gotten their ballot turned in yet, get it into the county office.
Yes, and Danny's still on the call. I don't know if Danny has any final words.
No, I just want to thank everyone for all their efforts on this this vote. It was a lot to wrangle, a lot of different perspectives, and I think this, ultimately, this vote that was on the ballot was very well thought out by both boards, and be sure to get you about it.
Thanks. All right, I don't hear or see any more questions coming through the chat, so I think I'll go ahead and end the meeting. And again, thank you for logging in and participating. And if you know of others that would want to watch this, I'll probably have this posted by tomorrow. So it'll be on our video page if you want to go back or forward it to somebody else. So thank you again. And you can also email us or call us with questions. If you think of them after we're done here, I'm happy to answer them as we get them. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks.